Kuzangpo, very warm welcome to Bhutan This Week. Our top stories. 2 royal kashos on education reform and civil service reform symbolically handed over to the people. Country's first mega dry port being constructed at Pasakhai in Chukha. And Education Ministry decides to stop giving freebies for students in rural schools. Now the news in detail. The 2 royal kashos on education reform and civil service reform granted on 17 December 2020 have been symbolically handed over to the people of Bhutan.
The 2 royal kashos on education reform and civil service reform granted on 17 December 2020 have been symbolically handed over to the people of Bhutan. The Royal Kasho on Civil Service Reform decrees that a Civil Service Reform Council be established to recommend to the Royal Government the directions for fundamentally restructuring the civil service so that it has a renewed vision for the 21st century. The Royal Kasho on Education Reform decrees that a time-bound council for education reform be established to prepare a visionary and workable roadmap for the 21st century to support the Royal Government of Bhutan.
Bhutan's progress in combating corruption improved last year compared to 2019. The country climbed a step up to 24th out of 180 countries and territories. This is as per the Transparency International, a German non-governmental organization working to combat global corruption.
Bhutan is listed among the 3 countries that improved its Corruption Perceptions Index, or CPI scores, over the past 10 years. The country scored 68 out of 100 in 2020, 5 points up compared to 2012. Estonia and Austria are the other countries whose CPI scores improved alongside Bhutan. A score of 100 indicates that a country is very clean, and 0 indicates that a country is highly corrupt. Bhutan consistently maintained its score at 68 since 2018. On the other hand, more than 52% of the countries saw significant reduction in their scores as per the Transparency International. New Zealand and Denmark are the top-ranked countries. At the bottom are South Sudan and Somalia. In the Asia-Pacific region, Bhutan is ranked the 6th least corrupt country since 2012. Meanwhile, as countries recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, the Transparency International is calling for enhanced anti-corruption efforts. It is recommending governments to mainstream anti-corruption policies in COVID-19 related plans and programs, strengthen institutions to enable real-time monitoring, and publish relevant data and guarantee its access to ensure fair and equitable policy responses. Pupkem for BBS News.
After testing over 30,000 people in the capital and all testing negative, Thimphu was declared a green zone on Friday last week. With this, movement between the mega zones were allowed. However, travel outside the district was permitted only from Monday. Offices, schools and institutions are also reopened and all sports activities allowed, but without spectators. At the same time, the government also assured people to put in place the measures to prevent another outbreak of the coronavirus in the community.
십제디 팀플레 메마시나 데날라파 샤추 이초하도 죄미마진 파민추나다 릴레베사기 바나랭아치 소이 캐쇼디수기 가이쿠사 구법 중라 또진바 구법베 미세기 차샵도 중 세슈니비 데카마 호아도 죄미마진 충좀 야이마이 카툴레 데가치기 십제디디베 퓨베 데달레 딱센치 튠베 니지유비 딱센 튠소바진 땡연카다 따디기베 야진 죄미데니오 야진 준수기 사고나 흡진 수르시나 주고미 인내갑된디 퓨 세슈니비 마치로 동튠 라베미기 팀순 각데디수이메 듄창잉이 바나카라 십제 사례 잡니라 나치르기 데숲 차로데수이메 콩차차베 듀티나 이루다 맨루다 소일 행카나로 차슈미기 소일 행카메마 멘카나 차슈미기 소이기 레롭디수이메 콩에 듀티나 이루다 맨루다 듄창잉이 바나 사례 잭잡자니 세슈니비 나치르기 데욕 टैक्सी तामी में बस तामी में ट्रक तामी में लेन 총기 날에 자카 창카나 라베 미디수이메 사캉나라 팔라베 미디수이메 단수에 가랑아시기 듄창잉이 바나 책 차례 잡니라.
Import and export of goods from Phinceling are expected to be further smoothened in the next few years once the country's first mega dry port at Pasakha is completed. The groundbreaking ceremony of the dry port was recently held in the presence of the Southern COVID-19 Task Force. Once complete, the dry port will have various facilities such as cold storage, warehouses, internal banking facilities, offices and residential spaces.
The first phase of the project was already started 2 months back. The first phase includes construction of a 1.2 kilometer long reinforced cement concrete wall. The wall will be built as high as 12 meters from the ground. Other packages in the pipeline include construction of approach road, refilling of the area, and construction of the infrastructures in the area. The dry port will have capacity to handle over 100 trucks at a go. It will cater to export and import services across the country.
The Pasakha dry port is expected to significantly address logistical challenges faced by the private sector, such as processing of export and import, transshipment of cargoes, long transit times, high freight costs for the movement of goods across the border. The port will also help reduce the risk of damages and pilferages to cargo during the processing, storage, and transshipment, while providing improved facilities for our traders.
As of now, nearly 10% of the RCC wall works are complete. These walls are expected to be completed by the end of this year. The dry port, worth nearly 2 billion ngiltram, will be built in over 15 acres of land along the border.
Currently, there are 130 workers engaged in this project. Of them, only 4 are foreign workers, and remaining are the people from nearby areas of Pasakha. Since these workers are unskilled and 70% of the work being along the banks of the river, the contractor is worried about the timely completion of the project. The contractor therefore applied for the additional workforce from the Build Bhutan project. Sonam Penjo for BBS News, Phinceling.
A yak disease is suspected to have affected the only yak herding community in Thangyul in Dongsa. The samples from the 2 sick yaks will be tested in the Regional Livestock Development Center in Shemgang for confirmation.
A team of officials visited grazing areas for yaks of Thangyul this month. It is part of their sensitization program. Git, or locally known as Kuyum, is a yak disease characterized by the loss of balance in the animals. It affects young yaks mostly below the age of 3. The disease is usually contracted while grazing grasses contaminated by dog tapeworms. It affects the brains and ultimately kills them painfully.
Ya dinalo te koyom ki taksin de theka te debe je mese shuni de su jaji hon lo yosalo tele gudi so phat so pya ko ki tele ji ngachera te chakumgi ne chakumgi de ne gi tasin de so garate mese shuni.
For now, the officials dewormed all yaks, dogs and sheep in the area.
Neji de theka te koyom tindi imbese washin dro lokdira de ngachiki honle de yali yubige ta dro ya nije de ji dro lube di biro nije de ji da dislo de lok matu to petak pe menji vini de ngachile de dismigi chaji seshuni.
The yaks and sheep are the main sources of living for people of Thangyul. The disease kills some 1,000 yaks every year in the country, so there is a reason for herders to worry. This is Pasa, BBS News.
The cold winter weather in the highlands dries up the vegetation, leaving grazing animals without much food. During such times, people in the highlands depend on animal feed to give as food to their domestic animals. To ensure the supply of animal feed during the recent lockdown, Tsintogeog Livestock Office in Paro supplied nearly 7 metric tons of livestock feed to the people of Se and Nupri. Livestock play an important part in the livelihoods of people in the north.
As winter becomes colder and harsher, grasses in the grazing lands here turn brown and animals are left with very little to graze. And it is during this time, people of Se Domza, Se Yansa, Yaksa and Nubri travel to Shana to buy feed for their cattle.
We fully depend upon livestock for livelihood.
Especially during winters, it is hard for animals to graze. So we must have stocks of karma feed and other feed. I have around 30 cattle, including yaks. So in a year, I must have 5 to 6 sacks of karma feed, mustard residue, and salt.
But this time, due to travel restrictions during the recent lockdown, Highlanders could not buy the animal feed. However, the livestock office ensured feed supplies were not disrupted.
Lockdown maybe additional the
We have an agent at Shana who distributes feed to people of Highlands, so people can come and take the required amount of feed from there. However, due to lockdown and movement restrictions, we had to deliver it.
As we prioritized the needs of people living in the highlands, we delivered a truckload of feed during the second lockdown. This truckload was delivered to people of Yaksa and Nubri.
The continuous supply of feed according to the people ensured their livestock remained healthy and helped increase production.
It is not at all possible to rear animals depending on dry grass alone at this time of the year. We must have feed and salt. If not, animals die of hunger and malnutrition.
It has benefited us a lot. Even when there are no movement restrictions, we have to come all the way to Paro town to buy the feeds. We have to tether our horses in Shana until we return from town.
However, with the lockdown now lifted, people have started migrating to the lowlands. They are optimistic of selling their dairy products that they stored during the lockdown at good profits. For Namgyeonchu in Paro, this is Pasang Doji for BBS News.
Her Royal Highness Princess Chimyangzuk Wangchuk recently graced a ceremony to formally grant high-quality face masks produced by Project Hope to the Education Ministry. With the first lot of face masks provided to frontline workers last month, close to 500,000 3D face masks will be distributed to teachers and students. With many people still at risk to COVID-19 infection, schools are one place where the risk is higher. Moreover, schools across the country will be reopening after 2 days. To minimize the risks of infection, Project Hope, led by Her Royal Highness, produced and distributed high-quality face masks for free to students and teachers upon the royal command of His Majesty the King.
There's going to be a lot of interaction between the teachers and the students, and if you see also, I think below the age of 18 years, they may not be vaccinated. So the best line of defense for them is to have a scientific mask like this, which is proven to be very effective. So I think if you look at the target group that has been identified, it's a very visionary aspect of His Majesty to see that they would be exposed.
At the Education Ministry, we are quite concerned about the safety of the students as well as of the teachers. You know, the school is opening from 3rd February. And we had some discussion within the ministry to mobilize some funds and buy the masks for the students now. But we were not really able to materialize that. Well, we received almost 500,000 of masks today. And our main worry of not being able to provide masks to the students and teachers is now no more there.
The mass distribution will equip students and teachers with one of the first lines of defense against the coronavirus. While Bhutan almost reached a 4-figure of confirmed cases recently, today there are less than 40 active cases in the country. And although vigorous tests have been done and strict protocols placed by the government, the country is not yet safe. Now that masks are becoming an integral part of everyday life, wearing the safest and the most comfortable masks is also important. These 3D masks are expected to not only prove to be protective, but also more comfortable and breathable. Project Hope said that the mask was very well researched and designed with the guidance of Her Royal Highness.
If you see the 3D mask, it's called 3D because it's got 3 layers. The outer layer is water repellent, and it's also between this and the inner cloth, the white fabrics, has space for the filter to be put, and there is enough room to maneuver, and you're at a comfort level to speak.
There are other safety protocols like hand washing, which of course is almost put in place in almost all the schools. And then also the social distance, keeping some space and all these things. So all these 3 together, hopefully, I think the safety of our children and well-being can be taken care of.
He added that some students not being able to afford masks and others putting on poor quality masks are some of the issues faced in schools. The 3D mask, however, is expected to solve these issues. In its first lot, over 100,000 face masks were distributed to frontline workers during the National Day celebrations and during the recent lockdown. A total of 6 million item were spent as payments to tailors since the project started, enabling many to earn a steady income. Samtin Dolkar, BBS News. The Education Ministry has decided that students in rural schools across the country will not be receiving freebies this year. This decision, they shared, has been made due to financial constraints. The government in 2018 had announced that all schools except for those under the Bhutan This would provide free uniforms and stationery to its students every year.
Since 2019, all students in rural schools were provided with free stationery worth 4,000 niltam and uniforms worth 2,500 niltam to certain students. However, due to budget constraints caused by the COVID pandemic, the Education Ministry says the government is not in a position to provide funds to central and other schools for procuring uniforms and stationery this year.
The Ministry of Finance has issued a budget notification which says that due to budget constraint in the government coffer, the schools has been asked not to buy any stationeries and uniforms for this year. So that is why we actually wanted to rewrite to the schools, Tongkoks and Thomdes, to discontinue purchasing stationeries and uniform for this academic year.
More than 160,000 students in rural schools were benefited from the provision last year. However, the government is estimated to save more than 340 million niltam from the decision this year. Ishidoji for BBS News.
Now, quite often we relate heroes to those with superhuman strength or in some cases supernatural powers, or at least that's what we have been made to believe, but that is just fiction. In testing times like today, we realize that our modern day heroes no longer wear capes. Instead, they wear lab suits, personal protective equipment and the orange uniform in the case of our next story. Let's take a look.
My name is Dessup Tashilhamo. I did Desung 39 batch training at Paro.
Dessup Tashilhamo joined duty right after training last summer. She has been in active service since then, taking just a month's break in between.
Right after my training, I rested for 2 days and I directly joined in quarantine duty at Olatham Hotel. After that, I came here during first phase of border duty and I did continue here for 2 months. This one will be my 4th month.
Despite standing out in the dust and sun for months, Tashi says nothing dims her motivation to keep going.
Sometimes I do feel like exhausted, but then after reaching at room and we have our king's cooper at our chest, and by looking at the kings we don't feel like exhausted. Instead we feel very proud and we feel like again serving continuously.
Desuptashi is currently unemployed. She completed class 12 in 2019. Being unemployed and staying months away from her family was tough on her.
We used to receive less vegetable allowance and that one is not sufficient for us to keep going. Last year after September month, His Majesty has granted us salary with 14,000 niltram. The salary has benefited us a lot. We are able to do things without depending on our parents and we could manage everything that we want to. Sometimes we are able to help our parents with this salary.
Times have been challenging, but Desuptashi has decided to continue her service even in the coming month. Like her, there are more than 150 Desups in Samtsi alone who have completed 4 months of duty on the front lines. Sharab Doji, BBS News, Samtsi.
New studies have confirmed that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine reduces transmission of coronavirus rather than simply preventing symptomatic infections. Researchers say the vaccine remained effective even after the first dose.
International media have reported that data from studies indicates the vaccine may have an impact on transmission. Scientists say if a vaccine only stops the patient from getting severely ill, but the virus still passes on, then everyone needs to be immunized to be protected. However, if the vaccine stops the virus from spreading, then it would have a far greater impact on the pandemic. Each person who is vaccinated would indirectly protect other people as well. It found that those who have been vaccinated with even a single dose were less likely to test positive. The study conducted on 17,000 people in the UK, South Africa and Brazil showed protection remained at 76% during the 3 months after the first dose. This rose to 82% after people were given the second dose. More than 9 million people have already received the first dose of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine globally. There are currently over 104 million coronavirus cases across the world. Sangishisom for BBS News.
Well, that's all we have for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Also visit our website www.bbs.bt. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and YouTube as well. Goodbye.